Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, Check Your Thread heads. How are you doing? What has been going on with you? Today, I've got a bit of a combo of hay fever, period cramps, lack of sleep, and a mild hangover. But other than those things, I'm doing well. I hope any making you've been doing has been going well also. This week I've been doing a bit of paid for sewing, so I've been making a sample garment for Fabric Godmother, so I haven't actually been doing any personal sewing this week. That said, I did cut out a top to make when this sample is done, and I'm really excited to get stuck into it. Speaking of Fabric Godmother, recently I took part in a team takeover of the Fabric Godmother Instagram account whilst our boss Josie was on holiday. So for the takeover, a number of us employees were asked to contribute a couple of posts and a video on a topic of our own choice. For my post in the feed, I wore a top that has been on the Fabric Godmother feed previously because I saw that as an opportunity to raise the topic of normalising outfit repeating on social media. And I also made a video that featured a whole bunch of project ideas and pattern suggestions that require 1 metre or less of fabric. So the goal with that is to encourage sewers to use as much of the fabric that they buy as possible, rather than always buying a new length of fabric for every project that they start. So if you want to see it, that video is saved in the highlights of the Fabric Godmother Instagram account under the section called Team Takeover. So if you're an Instagram user and you want to take a look, there it is. So I have 6 wonderful people to thank for stepping up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. Massive thanks to Abigail, Jill, Maggie, Pearl, Lynn and Caro. If you enjoy this podcast and you think that the topics it covers and messages it spreads are important, if you're able to, please consider supporting the podcast as well. It can be for any amount at all. Head to the show notes or to the website checkyourthread.com to find the link. It takes literally less than a minute to sign up. Okay, let's talk about what you're going to hear today. A while ago, I was given a tip-off from previous guest Erin Lewis Fitzgerald that Daisy Braid, aka DIY Daisy, was releasing a book. Daisy is the creator of lots of wonderful, incredibly inclusive and accessible sewing tutorials that work on a low-waste principle. You can find many on her website that are free to access, and now she's written a beautiful book that includes heaps more. These projects can be made for bodies of any size, and no prior knowledge of pattern drafting or even experience of regular sewing patterns is required. So Daisy was up for talking to me about her book and her background in making, and all about her approach to pattern drafting and sewing. It's so fun to talk to people that are finding different alternative ways to bring the joy of making to more people. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Okay, here we go. Fabulous. Thank you so much for doing this.
That's okay. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, it's the Zoe. Oh, like you started the Me Made May. I was like, what?
Yeah. Back when you were probably like a teenager or something, yeah?
No, surely not.
13 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I would have been 15.
Oh my goodness, that makes me feel so old. I was like 28.
Wow. That's how old I am now, so.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah.
Anyway, how are you doing today?
Doing really good. I've just had a burrito.
Right.
Yeah.
Lovely. So if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a bit about you? Can you tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Well, I'm Daisy and I live on the Gold Coast, which is my hometown in Australia. And in my daytimes, I am a social media and content manager for a small business called the Finders Keepers Market. They run these giant design markets all over Australia, and they've been doing it for like 15 years. And it's really exciting and inspiring because it's just basically you're working with lots of small businesses who are all really passionate about making and creating and locally made. So it's kind of like the ideal.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was actually the biggest fluke getting the job, but I'm so excited that I didn't think I was going to get it, and then I sent the boss a message on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
and that kind of I think that sealed the deal because she was like, "Oh,
really?
This girl's keen." That's what I do in my daytimes
Yeah.
when I'm not going to going to the gym or eating or sewing, I guess.
So let's talk about sewing. How long have you been doing it? And, when did you start?
Well, I think properly sewing in the in the DIY style, I've been doing it since 2016, but I did start sewing when I was a teenager. So when I was like 12 maybe, I had a sewing machine, hand me down sewing machine from my grandma. My twin sister and I, we loved op shopping, and we followed this woman called Geneva, who in Australia, I'm sure overseas as well, she's quite well known, but she's known as Geneva Van der Ziel. She used to be called DIY A Pair and Despair. I think her Instagram now is called Creative Jen, and she used to do
Oh,
all of these like upcycled bath mats and like twisty crop tops and things like that. And so she was like one of my first inspos as like a blogger back in,
cool.
when blogging was like all the like blog lovin' and all of those things were kind
Yeah,
of a
yeah,
thing. So
yeah.
we were like, oh, we want to go upcycle some things. So we would go to the up shop and we would buy floral blouses, and we would like cut the sleeves off and put ribbon through a little casing and make these funny drawstring kind of tops. Yeah, and then in I think it might have been like year 9 or year 10, we had to do work experience. And so my twin sister and I, we were like, we want to do something cool. We don't want to go do the regular just like working in a hairdresser, like sweeping up hair or anything like that. We were like, okay, what connections do we have? Our auntie in New Zealand is a fashion designer, and it
Handy.
happened to be lining up with New Zealand Fashion Week. So we got flights over to New Zealand and we stayed there for like 2 weeks, maybe. We helped out at New Zealand Fashion Week as like
Oh, how
work
fun.
experience. And like from that day, I was like I have to be in fashion somehow.
Really?
Yeah. And so, yeah, after that, it just kind of like every now and then I would like upcycle what I could. And then my auntie would send remnants over to Australia, and I would just make these funny elastic crop top boob tube things. Lots of rectangles, lots of elastic. And then I guess that's actually kind of where I got back into sewing, was in New Zealand as well.
Oh, that's amazing. So when did you start your website?
So I started it in New Zealand in 2016. I moved over there because I was sort of like, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. My mum said to me, you are not yourself. You're negative. At this time, I didn't have a creative outlet anymore, and I'd just
Right.
been dumped. I'd been cheated
Oh,
on. So I was like lost and sad.
oh,
Yeah, mum basically was like, go to New Zealand, stay with your auntie, help her with her work, and just find yourself again.
oh, that sounds like the best thing.
It really was. I went there with the intention of being there for 3 months, and I ended up
Yeah.
being there for 2 years.
Is that in Auckland?
Yeah, in Auckland. Yeah, I went there. I ended up getting a job at the fabric store.
Oh.
Yes. So I think that was also a fluke, but very luckily, I got a job as the media and design manager. So I was the person that did
Wow.
like all like social media and wrote the blogs and took some photos and things like that. That was where it started.
Wow. And then you're
Yeah.
surrounded by this fabric. You're feeling
Exactly.
super creative. You're in a
Yes.
new
And just
place.
opportunities to make as a job. I was like, you can have a job where you can create and enjoy what you're doing and do something like exciting and fun, and where you actually get to use your imagination and creativity. And, these jobs exist. I was like, whoa, okay.
So you have been so generous though with your time because you've created some really amazing free tutorials which are available on your website.
Oh,
So
thanks.
what inspired you to make those tutorials? Because they must have taken you so much time.
Well, I don't know what it was exactly, but for me, when I started sewing, I think maybe I looked at sewing patterns or construction maybe in a different way, and just
Right.
saw that you can make things without instructions
Yeah.
or there's like an alternative way of making an item of clothing. And it was sort of like more challenging in the way that it was kind of like a math
Sure.
problem, and so you're sort of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
solving this problem in your mind. And so by making clothing in that way of just like breaking it down to its sort of its like base pieces, like the shapes that
Yeah.
it's made of, I was like, oh, if I break it down to this way, you can put it back together and create something else. But it's, I guess, like, yeah, so like an alternative way. And I just thought, I'm going to share this because maybe at the time there weren't that many resources in that way. Like there's definitely people that have been sharing tutorials like that, like Maddie from the Essentials Club, she does that too.
Right.
And Geneva, who I mentioned before from Creative Gen, like that's what she has been doing since I was a teenager. So maybe I was like, I want to be like that. I want to share this do-it-yourself kind of approach to sewing. And I guess when we were all at home in lockdown, that's when I was like, ooh, now's the time to share some things.
I feel like when the kind of online sewing community was kind of in its infancy, maybe about 12 years ago, possibly, there were a lot more people sharing resources and tutorials, and it was a lot more kind of DIY, people sticking things up on their blogs and stuff. And then it's almost like things became a bit more, I don't know what to say, a lot more kind of indie sewing patterns kind of came up. And everything became a bit more almost commercial,
Yes.
And so when it was, at the beginning, there wasn't that many independent sewing patterns, for example. So it was like the big four or not much else. That's why people started to share a few more tutorials and stuff. And then there was all these new amazing indie sewing patterns. It almost put the tutorials and the more DIY aspect, it kind of almost overshone that a little bit, I think. Don't you think? And I think it can be quite intimidating because there's there's like a real leap you have to make, isn't there, to like getting into using sewing patterns. Whereas you've kind of taken it back to where, you're taking your own measurements, you're breaking things down, as you say, you're really simplifying it and explaining it in a really accessible way. I think accessible is the only word I can think of, really, like that's what I love. I'm going to get onto your book shortly, but I've just been looking at it and I love it so much because it is so accessible. Like it's open to people of any body size or shape, isn't it? Because you're taking your own measurements. And literally like you're getting people to pattern draft, but without like telling them that they're pattern drafting.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's like saying to someone, you're going to pattern draft this, but you're going to do this without all of the terminology, because I didn't go to fashion school and I don't know how to draft things correctly. It's, I guess, like with intuition or initiative, just like this is just how it goes together, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Yeah, it's the only way I can describe it is call it a DIY approach.
But I love it so much, and so let's talk about your book. It's amazing. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful as well. Like it's got such a beautiful, fresh aesthetic, and it's very you as well. It's got your colours. It's got your fonts.
Yeah.
Do you feel when you see it, you think, oh, this is it. This encapsulates what I've been doing.
Yes. Well, I mean, all the colours and even the fabrics, like down to the fabrics. When I first spoke to my editor, Emily, she was like, we have to make sure that you've got gingham, liberty and bright colours because that is that's you. So it's been a very exciting, crazy journey. Never ever thought that I would write a book, let alone a book about sewing, especially as someone who is a self-taught sewist. I mean, there has been times in my career where I have felt like, I guess like I could say like not good enough or not, sewing perfectly or things like that. And then when this opportunity came along, I was like, oh, okay, maybe people do like this approach, or maybe people do like what I'm doing, even though it's not perfect or professional, I guess.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
I see. That's so interesting. Oh, I just feel that it's for everyone. Yeah, you've stripped it down. You've stripped away that terminology that maybe you didn't even learn in the first place,
Yes.
So how did it come about then? You're saying like it wasn't something you necessarily set out to do.
So I was living in Japan and I came home from Japan during the pandemic, so 2020, and that was the year that I was like, okay, I don't really have a job, so I'm just going to stay at home and write tutorials. And in that year, my Instagram account sort of started to grow a little bit faster than it had in the past.
Right.
And I started receiving some different kinds of emails every now and then from people that wanted to collaborate or people that wanted to do something together. And then in January of 2021, an email came through my inbox from an editor at Hardy Grant. And I was like, Hardy Grant, who is Hardy Grant? So I quickly went on their website and so I saw some of the books of the authors that they've published before. And these are people that are in the Australian creative community, are people that I follow for inspiration, for colour inspiration, for creativity. So people like Rachel Burke, who is I Makestagram, she does the tinsel jackets and all the very sparkly, colourful bits and bobs. She's amazing. And then a paper and craft-based designer in Melbourne called Katia Palaskis, and then Becky Orpin. They've all done books with Heidi Grant. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is legit. So she said to me, Daisy, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, no. Because in my
That's so
mind...
funny because you've written all these amazing tutorials that put them together. That's a book.
Exactly. Yeah. So in my mind, I was like, oh, no one wants to read my stuff as a book, but turns out they thought that it was kind of a good idea. So I said, yeah, let's do it.
So what was the process like of writing it?
Wow, the process was crazy. I would say it would be like going to uni and doing like a full subject load, except your finished work is going to be published in multiple countries. And, hopefully thousands of people will buy it. And so definitely felt quite a bit of pressure there. But yeah, so I started writing in like March.
Right, quick turnaround.
It was a really quick turnaround. So I kind of, she said to me, Daisy, what I need from you is kind of like a little proposal. So I want to know who you are, what's your background, what can you tell me that like people don't know about you that could add to this story of you being someone that people want to read their book. And then she said, what projects would you put inside a sewing book? So I drew all of these sketches of projects that I already have on my website, and then ones that in my mind I had wanted to create. And then I sent it off to her, and then she actually pitched it the day that my grandma, Rosebud, who was an amazing sewist, she passed on that day. So weirdly, so all day I was so excited. I was like, oh, they're pitching my book today. I'm really scared. And then luckily a week beforehand, I'd been able to tell my granddad, can you please tell Rosebud that I might be writing a book about sewing? Because, she was one of the people who inspired me to start sewing at the start, just because she's always sewed her whole life. And so, so on that day they pitched, she passed. It was really, it was a day. A week or so later, I got an email that said, Daisy, we're doing this. We're going to do it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it was very emotional. And the whole process has been super emotional. And then she basically gave me like, here's the contract. Here's when I need the manuscript. Go. And I was like, okay. But luckily I was able to reach out to some of those people in the Aussie creative community who have written books with Heidi Grant or other publishers and ask them for advice. And some of the things that they told me, like completely the most amazing advice I could have ever, and just also like warnings about how you might feel at the end of it and that kind of thing.
Oh, amazing. I love that you were then, in communication with your inspiration.
I know, and they were incredibly generous with their time and just sharing like their experiences and telling me things that I probably would have never thought of. So I was very lucky to have that little bit of like foresight into things like, what might happen at a photo shoot and make sure you do this so that this doesn't happen. And then I had another friend said, at the end of writing a book, you're probably going to be so burnt out that you won't want to sew again. And that happened. Oh my gosh, that happened. But yeah, at the end of it, and even now, I'm still not that excited to sew just because I went so hard on it last year.
Wow, that's so interesting. So when you were writing your book, did you have somebody in mind, like a specific, character or in your mind of who you were creating it for?
Yeah, I guess I wrote this book for beginners, but I also wrote this book for anyone that enjoys sewing or has maybe lost the joy of sewing and just wants to find a different approach, because I'm sure you can relate to this, but when you lose your sojo and you need something to just spark it off again, sometimes you might look for inspiration on Instagram or Pinterest, or you might open a book. And sometimes making something, whether that be a tried and true pattern or making something that's so simple and mindless, can just get your creative juices flowing again and just sort of, make your brain think in a slightly different way.
Absolutely.
I want it to be for everyone, and I hope that I've conveyed that in how I've written and how I've shown the garments and the models that I've used.
Definitely. I have to say that my current project is a Stephanie rectangle top.
Cool.
So I've been doing a lot of scrap busting lately, and I just had this vision of a really simple kind of boxy top for my friend who lives in Spain. It's very hot and sticky there, coming up to summer there. So I've got all these scraps of viscose and tencel and Cupro. So I've been piecing them together, and I just thought, I just want a really basic kind of like rectangular kind of, and I was like, I know. Because I've just been looking through your book, so I've been using your book as the basis. So I haven't done the sides yet, but you can see I've pieced together
Oh my gosh, you can see the drape. How
some crazy
good.
fabric, and I just think the drape is going to work so
Perfectly.
well with. So yeah, I love it, and I think that it's going to be the basis for a lot of projects in the future. So
You're
thank you.
welcome.
So have you got a favourite project from your book?
Ooh, it's a tricky one because I kind of make the same patterns over and over again. Of course, I love the Maya ruffle dress. Like that's probably the pattern or the project that has gone the widest in sewing land.
Yes, yes, I've seen some amazing examples on
Yeah. And
Instagram.
then there's also the rosebud raglan top, which is named after my grandma. And it's kind of like, I can just see so much potential for different ways to hack it. And I really want to
Cool.
see like how people use it because I know everyone loves a puffy sleeve at the moment. And so it's got these really great puffy sleeves. But I think the one that is my favorite, and it was meant to be something totally different, is the variation of the Stephanie rectangle top. It's kind of like a jacket,
Yeah,
and I've been wearing it. I've actually just been pinning it with a safety pin to close the front of it, but
right.
it's just sort of become this sort of airy wrap top sort of thing, and I wear it
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, it's going to be so fun, isn't it? When your book is fully
I
out there,
know.
and then it's in the
I know.
world,
I can't wait.
and then people are going to take it and use it as a basis for their own things
Yeah.
and take it into different
Yeah,
directions.
I just really hope that, I mean, in my mind, I know what it's for and what it's about, but I really hope that people use it as a way of going, okay, this is the base, this is a guideline, and then really making it their own and using the ideas and using the concepts to then practice self drafting or DIYing their own kind of new things.
Yeah, I'm sure they will because it really invites
Yeah.
that. You've given it such a free approach. You're like, take some measurements, use that if you want,
Yeah.
or adapt it,
Yeah. Finish the seams how you want to finish them, make the sleeves as long as you want them, cut them shorter if they're too long.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're giving people permission just to
Yeah.
go for it. And that's so nice. So a lot of the projects they seem to have kind of like a zero waste or a low waste kind
Yeah.
of approach. Plus you've got lots of others like the accessories that would be amazing scrap
Yeah.
busters also. So is that zero waste, low waste an approach that's kind of you've come to naturally, or have you been inspired elsewhere and you wanted to adapt it?
Initially, I was using this sort of approach. I don't call it zero waste, but I like to say like low waste if possible. When I started sewing at the fabric store, they had a lot of Liberty fabrics. And
It's not cheap.
I know, I didn't want to waste a single centimeter of that Liberty fabric. So in order to do
Yeah.
that, I had to use the full width of the fabric. And so I guess I just sort of learned from that to, how to use the full width for my body. And I know that that doesn't work for everybody's body. Sometimes it will mean you'll need more fabric or you may need to cut some off. I guess it's just through using shapes, like really simple ones
Mm-hmm.
like squares and rectangles, you do have the ability to just create waste that is repurposable. Like when you cut something out that's all wiggly and wobbly, you don't
Yeah.
have much of an option there to repurpose it into something else. But if your scraps are a rectangle or they're a square, I think you just have a bit more to work with after.
Yeah.
I guess because I am not professionally trained and I've learned everything just from watching YouTube videos, or I don't really know the best way to be zero waste in making patterns, but I feel like people like I think it's Bridget Helmerson, is that what her name is called?
I believe it's Birgitta, but I don't quote me on that.
Yeah, so her patterns, they're amazing. The way that she takes that zero waste approach and turns rectangles and squares into these beautiful shapes. So I look to people like that and then I go, okay, how do I do that in a DIY way?
So one of the things I really love about your book, apart from like the aesthetic and a lot of the projects and the accessible approach, is I really love in it that you've really conveyed like your philosophy around making and also like your motivations for doing it as well. Did you find that difficult to put into words? Because it's not something that regularly we need to unless we're asked to write something.
I know. Well, I wasn't even sure what to write in the book. At first, I thought, how am I going to fill up 200 pages? And I actually went to the library and I started flicking through other sewing books and seeing what did they include? What did they say?
Right.
And I thought, I think that's something that I need to tell people why I sew and why I sew this way, because not everybody is going to have the same approach. But I think if they understand like why I'm doing it this way, then maybe they can relate to it more.
So why do you sew then, and sew in the way that you do?
Well, I guess maybe not the way that I do, but the reason that I do is because, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but clothing in stores, they don't fit my body or express my personality in the way that makes me feel like truly myself. And I feel like, especially for people that don't fit into society's idea of standard body sizes or body shapes or anything like that, or standard color combinations, or I've just felt like if I can sew the things that I want to wear, then I'll feel like myself. And I definitely feel that way. Like if I can wear the colors that I want to wear, which I cannot buy anywhere because where I live, it's very cool to just wear beige.
Right. Interesting.
Or, basic blue jeans and a white singlet. And I don't want to. I want to wear yellow, or I want to wear green, or I want to wear, all of those sorts of things. So I think that, I sew because I want to wear things that make me feel like myself. And I feel so much more like myself when I'm wearing something I've made.
Oh, that's so nice.
It's just, I'm not sure if that completely explains it, but I think that for people that can't find clothing that fits their body how they want it to, that if you can make it yourself, then hopefully you'll feel a little bit more like yourself.
So empowering.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you feel the same way about something, right?
Definitely. And something that obviously, as someone who's making this podcast, can relate to is what you were saying about how one of your motivations was about wanting to kind of extract yourself from fast fashion and the damage and issues surrounding that. So can you remember how or when that started to become a factor in why you chose to make your own things?
It must have been when I was in high school. Like, I have always been an op shopper and I've always loved buying secondhand. And then I guess I went through a phase of being a fast fashion addict. I'm sure a lot of us go through that.
Well, anyone that's interested in clothes, kind of that's how it starts.
Yeah, you can't ignore it. You just can't. Yeah. It must have been around then. I guess after uni or around uni, I had a lot of disposable income and I was like, hold on. I have too much stuff. And I still go through this now, and I went through it recently again. I just thought, I just have too much stuff. I don't need all of this. I felt this feeling of being overwhelmed.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess we all experience that moment where you go, I mean, maybe we don't. Maybe we don't all experience that, but I definitely had this day where I was like, having all this stuff overwhelms me. I don't need all of this. I feel guilty. Do other people have all of this stuff?
So what does sewing more sustainably mean to you? Can you think of anything how you approach sewing that might apply to that?
Well, I've definitely changed the way that I sew in the last 6 months.
Right.
And that's it happened, I guess, maybe when I was writing, I started to have this feeling like, am I making this because I need it, or am I making this because I want to post new content?
Interesting.
Yeah. So I had a bit of not a breakdown, but I think I was having this actually at the same time as someone else, and we both talked about it a lot. But Natalie Ebor from USA, her and I at the same time were having this like, why are we making all of this stuff like just for Instagram? So last March we did a little thing together. We called it No Make March.
Nice.
And we just wanted to have this month of really looking at the way that we're making and looking at the way that we're holding on to things.
Right.
Some people got it behind it and they were like, cool idea, that's cool, you do you. And I think for some people it won't apply because they sew for a hobby, but we sew for, I guess, a side hustle.
Yeah. And also when you've got a book to promote as well, there's, I guess, a certain pressure to be promoting the projects in your book by creating new examples and stuff.
Exactly. It's been hard because in my mind, I know I need to do those things, but I'm trying to think how can I promote this, or how can I keep my engagement flowing, or keep people coming over and clicking on my website without having something new all the time?
Yeah. So have you found that balance, or are you still working on it?
I'm still working on it, and I think it will be something that I work on for the rest of the year because while I do try and have that balance of promoting the book and showing people what's inside, but also making sure that I'm not just making things for the sake of making new content.
Yeah.
Some feedback that I got when we did make No Make March, someone said in a comment, why can't we just make, like, isn't this meant to be about joy and fun? And they got a little bit grumpy, and I was like, yes, of course. But for me, if I want to be mindful about the way that I'm producing or my output, making something new all the time isn't sustainable, not only for the world and everything else, but it's also not sustainable for my mental health.
Especially if you're feeling overwhelmed by all the things that you've got.
Yeah. And I think it also goes hand in hand with the idea of like overconsumption. Like people in fast fashion, I guess, people are always, doing, oh, this is my new haul from here or there. And it's like we had this same, and we sort of still do in the sewing world, is have this, here's my new fabric haul, here's my new this and that. And here's my 10 new things that I made this month.
Yeah, it's easy to transfer those same kind of patterns of consumption and just onto a new area of your life, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And so that's been, for me, it's like, okay, how do I continue to make content and engage the community without having something brand new every week?
Yeah.
I kind of have called fast fabric is something that I've been talking about a little bit.
Yeah.
Or fast sewing. I don't really know how I would call it in regards to sewing. But yeah, there's definitely, if you're first starting out and you're all excited about sewing, I get it. You're going to want to sew all the time. But for people that have been making for a few years or, 10 years or more, maybe you already have a full wardrobe of me-made clothes.
Yeah.
And how many more frocks do you need?
Exactly. So it's so interesting that this is certainly a storyline that I can relate to for sure as well.
And I guess that comes back to the whole, even with Me Made May, is to wear what's in your wardrobe and try and give all of those pieces a lot of wear. And lately I have been re-wearing like a crazy person and I love it.
Yes.
Like I have worn the same 4 or 5 outfits everywhere I go and I don't even care.
Yeah. It makes, especially because you're doing a lot of traveling at the moment, aren't you, for doing classes and stuff. It makes like traveling much easier, doesn't it? If you're like, I'm just going to take those trousers, that top, extra cardi.
Exactly. And I don't think I'd be able to get through this year without having that like core wardrobe of things that I love and I'm obsessed with. And I think another part about it is, people will recognize me because they'll be like, oh, that's the thing that Daisy always wears. Or at least I'll be on brand. I'll be on brand,
Like, there she is. There's the colours.
Yeah.
So how do you source your fabrics then these days, and how do you manage the waste that comes from it?
Well, actually, I haven't really bought fabric for ages. I did a big de-stash in like January or February.
Yes.
Like the biggest de-stash of my life.
Right. What did you do with those fabrics?
I just sold them.
Cool.
I was able to, pass them along to people in the Aussie sewing community. But I admit I had a gigantic stash and that just comes as a result of working at the fabric store.
Sure, yeah.
And I acknowledge that I was at this point where I was like, I'm never going to wear those prints. There's no point of me holding on to them.
Yeah.
Or certain colours. So what I did is I started by like defining my style and recognising that, okay, these are the things I really am going to wear and the colours that I'm going to wear going forward.
Yeah.
Everything else I got rid of. And so I haven't actually bought new fabric until 2 days ago.
Wow.
I feel good about it.
So do you keep your leftovers and your scraps, or what's your process for managing that?
I've actually kept every single scrap of linen fabric that I've ever sewn with.
Wow.
And I've just been patchworking, like I'm going through a patchworking phase. I'm just patchworking them together and making wall hangings and just sort of making new textiles.
Yes.
And that is bringing me a lot of joy because it's sort of this simple sewing that I guess is for, when you don't have a sojo.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I've been a little bit productive.
Yeah.
So I usually buy fabric from the fabric store or Drapers or Liberty. I get it from the Strawberry Thief in Australia.
Right.
Or Blackbird Fabrics. I love their linens. I mainly sew with the same 2 or 3 fabrics. So I sew with Liberty Tana Lawn, linen, 100% linen.
Yeah. And
cotton lawn. So
you can tell what climate you live in by the fact that you just said that sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that if I'm using the same fabric, my scraps can then be put together and they'll be the same weight.
That's such a good point.
But I also don't really sew knits. That's one thing that I do buy is like basics. So T-shirts, like cotton jersey T-shirts and knits I buy, ready to wear.
Yeah. But I love that. I love like streamlining the fabrics that you love to sew with. And then also if you are keeping to a colour palette that really appeals to you, your scraps just naturally kind of go together, don't they? So
they do.
Piecing them together, it's like, it's like a little snapshot of your wardrobe, isn't it?
It is. And it's cool because I can go, I remember what I made with that was this. And I guess it's like
a little memory block.
It is, yeah. But I hope to use those scraps. I'm going to do a scrunchy headband workshop soon. So I'm going to take some of those scraps with me just for options, other
Cool.
colours. Yeah.
Lovely. So you are clearly a massive inspiration for loads of people who are getting into sewing or wanting to kind of explore more DIY approaches to sewing. So you've mentioned a number of makers and designers throughout this podcast that inspire you, but could you just give us a little bit of a list of people that we can go and explore that inspire you?
Okay, well, I've got quite a list.
Go.
I love Francesca from the London Loom.
Right. Yes.
As soon as I saw her Instagram, I was like, we are kindred spirits.
I think you've got similar colour palettes, haven't you?
Yes, we do. And she's also a Hardy Grant author.
Ah, there you go.
She wrote a book about weaving. So I love Natalie Ebor. I love Martha, who was Buried Diamond.
Right.
She is an incredible technical sewist, and I'm very inspired to one day maybe make things in the way that she does.
Ooh.
In terms of DIY sewing, Maddie from the Essentials Club, who I mentioned earlier, she's awesome, and she makes things that are like on trend, and which is like cool because if you're looking to get into a current trend but you want to do it yourself, then she usually has a cool tutorial.
That's very cool.
I know, yeah. It's really cool. Like, and she, you know what? She lives around the corner from me.
Aww.
I never knew this. I never knew.
Have you met in real life?
Yes, we have met in real life, and it turns out I went to school with her cousin my whole life.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I wish you all the very best with the launch of your book, and
thank you,
I
Zoe.
will continue to follow you on Instagram and be super inspired. Thank you so much for your time.
You too.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!